Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, and we are back with some more post-Main Fest predictions. I know New York is still coming up, but TIFF, Telluride, Venice, we've heard a lot of new things. Before we dive into today's predictions, as always, drop a comment down below for what some of your updated predictions are. Consider subscribing, dropping a like. It helps our channel grow, as well as helping you stay updated with all this content we have. Matt just went to TIFF. We have like 10 different vlogs of him seeing over 50 movies. And I'll be going to Virginia coming up soon, so more vlogs on the way. But let's not waste any more time. Dive into these predictions. We just did Best Picture yesterday. We did all of our updates in the race. So let's just dive in. Best Director, it's over to Matt, and he has a brand new number one.
Ooh, and I'm so excited to have this person at number one. So, Dylan, you did your Best Picture lineup where your top three was Oppenheimer, Killers, and Poor Things. Now, I've got the same top three in my Best Director lineup, but in a different order, because at number one, I've got my boy, Yorgos Lanthimos. This movie seems like a visual feast, a spectacle of direction, something that is just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. And that sort of visual inventiveness feels like it's going to become a Guillermo del Toro Shape of Water style contender, where it just bulldozes the season by being so fantastic and unlike something people have seen before. It also reminds me of Daniel's last year. Following Yorgos, at number two, I have Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer. This is the choice that probably makes the most sense. I probably should have Yorgos below Christopher Nolan, but I'm just going with my gut right now, and my gut is telling me Poor Things sweeps. I do think Christopher Nolan's going to get his award someday. He could get it this year. I do think director's a little bit more likely than screenplay. So if we see a split, I would say we see picture for Poor Things, director for Christopher Nolan, and screenplay for Poor Things. But at this point, I'm just going with a sweep. I'm riding for Yorgos Lanthimos. Then in third place, and this is a firm third place, a bit of a distant third place. This person is 100% getting nominated. Is he winning? No. Is he in conversation to win? No. And that's Martin Scorsese, Killers of the Flower Moon. He is going to be, throughout the season, present every single time there's a directing category. But is he going to be winning those categories? I don't think so.
I fully agree about Martin Scorsese being a little far off, but still being a lock for a nomination. He will show up everywhere. DGA, Golden Globe, BAFTA. He's in the lineup. Knock it down right now. Then, Yorgos Nolan, I could see the case for Yorgos winning. This does just sound like a director win. But also, if you don't give it to Nolan for this, all you're going to hear is how Nolan missed his opportunity. I know that's not how they think, but this just feels like his time. Even if Oppenheimer loses picture, even loses adapted screenplay, he still wins director unless he's snubbed. I think he either wins or he's snubbed. If he's in the category, he takes it. Or he just misses, and then it's Yorgos' award. They're definitely number one, number two. Just I feel a little bit more stronger towards Nolan than I do for Yorgos. And then I think in adapted, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I think Yorgos is a little stronger there.
Here's my prediction of what's going to go down this season. I think Poor Things is going to sweep and, in a lot of people's minds, rob Oppenheimer of the big awards. And I think people who normally would have never seen Poor Things are going to watch it because they're upset that Oppenheimer didn't win Best Picture. And I can see Poor Things being labeled one of the worst Best Picture wins of all time because it beats Oppenheimer. Because you're right, the Academy does not think of things in the terms of, oh, it's his time. Christopher Nolan may win, he may not win, but just because it's his time, just because he made a big movie that is getting critical acclaim, if it's not the Academy darling, they don't owe him anything. David Fincher's another great example. The Social Network was his time, and ultimately they just preferred another film. I really think that that's just how this season's going to shake up, that it's going to be, people will keep saying all year long, it's Christopher Nolan's time, and when it comes down to it, the Academy just doesn't give a shit about that. So at number 4, I have Greta Gerwig for Barbie. This is a directorial feat. And this movie is top 5 for Best Picture, as we've talked about before. I have seen a lot of people say this movie's stronger in screenplay than in directing. I would agree, but at the same time, the direction is really strong. And here's the other thing. Remember how much backlash there was in 2019 when Greta Gerwig missed the nomination for Little Women? Multiply that by 100, and that's how bad it'll be if Barbie misses Best Director. Because that would mean that they will likely not have a woman nominated in the category. Greta Gerwig directed the highest grossing movie ever made by a woman, and it is a strong Oscar contender in other categories. If we get to the end of the year and Gerwig misses this category, I have a feeling like there will be rule changes that happen if that happens. I could see them going to a BAFTA-esque system where they have like a jury, which is not good. I think that is a shitty system. We should just hopefully go on merit. But Greta Gerwig, I think that the internet will explode if she doesn't get a directing nomination.
Barbie's a lot stronger in screenplay, but just because it's stronger in a category doesn't mean it can't get into a director. Like you mentioned, this is a strong Best Picture movie. It's top 4 at minimum. I think you can make a case for it being higher, but right now 4 is, I think, the lowest you can put it.
Yeah. With
that being said, usually if you're top 4 in Best Picture, unless your movie's just like a writing-only movie, you're gonna get into director. And like you mentioned, Greta Gerwig is doing a lot of stuff in the movie. Why would she miss, once you go through some of your other people down below, why would she miss there outside of, Barbie just having a massive fall, which probably isn't going to happen.
My number 5 slot, this is a bit contentious. And I'm going to say my next 3 are all kind of fighting for that slot. So the one I have right now is interesting because I don't have the zone of interest in really any other categories except for director and sound. So I've got 2 nominations, no picture for this movie. And it's not without precedent. In the past, we have seen many times a movie get a director nomination without a picture nomination. The last time it happened, I believe, was Bennett Miller for Foxcatcher in 2014. And we've seen this happen in the past. Could the zone of interest do that? Maybe. Now, the other thing to counter that is, would those movies have gotten into a field of 10 nominees? I don't think Zone of Interest will get into a field of 10 nominees, but I still think Jonathan Glazer could make it, and he is my pick right now because I can see the sort of artsy international branch will rally behind him. This film is an achievement in direction. Even if someone doesn't love the film, they will appreciate it. And I could see some people putting it on their directing ballot without putting it in their picture ballot. So that's my argument for Jonathan Glazer right now. Again, he's a very weak 5 because this film just, I don't think, is very strong whatsoever. Who could replace Jonathan Glazer, though? Well, the 2 that I see at the moment as potential replacements are Alexander Payne for The Holdovers. Now, Alexander Payne has been nominated basically every single time he's gotten a picture nomination. He has been in director. For Sideways, for The Descendants, for Nebraska. Actually, that is every time he's been in Best Picture, he's gotten into Best Director. And I could see the same thing happen here. It is a very confidently directed film, one that is not very flashy, but at the same time, the strength of the movie doesn't just come from the script, it comes from how just confidently the material is handled. Also, looking at my top 5 for director, I could put Alexander Payne at my number 5 slot, but I went through and looked at a stat that I was curious about, which is what was the last year that not a single new director got a nomination in the directing category. And I had to go all the way back to 1951 to find a year where there was not a single first-time nominee in Best Director. Every other year, there's usually at minimum 1. That's very rare. That's what I'm looking at this year. But most years have 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 nominees in Best Director have never been nominated for Best Director before. And that's why I have to have either Jonathan Glazer, Andrew Haigh, or someone like Justine Triet in my top 5. Otherwise, this would be a major, major stat-breaking year.
I mean, this does sound like a year where stats are being broken and we have so many returning nominees in Best Picture. Some people have 7, 8 returning nominees in picture. Talk about all year, it has to be 5, 5, 6, 4. Maybe the director one breaks as well, but I'm with you. Glazer's my 5. Blitz fits this as well, so does Triet, but we see some crazy shit and Nolan gets snubbed and we have a 3 too.
Oh, he's safe. I could see someone like Gerwig get snubbed or Scorsese get snubbed. I don't think Lanthimos. I don't think Lanthimos would. Lanthimos and Nolan, I'd say, are safe. And I'd say Scorsese is relatively safe. I feel very confident that we're going to see at least one fresh face in Best Director this year. Then, at number 7, Andrew Haigh for All of Us Strangers. Now, this, as I mentioned in your picture video, could be the international spot over Jonathan Glazer, The Zone of Interest. It's going to be a huge critics pick, and it could be the movie that the snobbier, snootier members of the director's branch really rally behind. But at the moment, I'm just going to stick with Glazer. He seems like the strongest at this point, even though his film is the weakest of those three.
I have Glazer at my number 5 as well. I think his two main competitors are two people you haven't talked about yet, so I'll let you go through the rest of your lineup before I say which two those are.
So Bradley Cooper, Maestro, I could also see happen here, but I want to see the film and I want to know more about it before I predict him there. If he couldn't make it in for A Star is Born, which is just objectively a stronger contender than Maestro is, then I don't know about this one. Then there's Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall, and her film, in my opinion, has dropped a little bit. Triet is just, she's facing Glazer, she's facing Haig, and though her film, again, is probably stronger than both of those, at least stronger than Zone of Interest, I just don't know about her in directing. I think that Sandra Hüller might carry this movie a little bit more than her direction does. Then, rounding up my top 10, I have Celine Song for Past Lives, which this film is, again, it's going to be a massive critic push. And if we just keep talking about what the snobby choice is going to be, what the artsy director's choice will be, Past Lives could be that. If we see a major resurgence for this movie, if we see a lot of love for it in precursors, Celine Song could end up being that pick. Now, just to toss a few others out there, there's Blitz Bazawule for The Color Purple. At one point, this was my directing winner. At this point, not in my top 10. Then afterwards, I have Ridley Scott for Napoleon, one of the few films we haven't seen that could be a massive, huge, epic, historical achievement. Then Sofia Coppola for Priscilla, and Ava DuVernay for Origin round out my full list.
The two people who I was thinking about before would be Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall. I mean, very much on the nose, but the other main international contender. And I would still say, if Color Purple is battling for Best Picture, Blitz is still in the race. That would be saying that Color Purple is more of a top 5 player than where I have it right now at number 9, at number 8. But there's still a path for this movie to burst into the race at the very last moment. So to me, he is still up there battling for a nomination. I know right in this moment, he's probably not very strong. I mean, no one's seen the movie. We've seen the rest of these movies, but at least to me, I feel like Blitz still has a very strong angle to get in, where someone like Bradley Cooper, where you mentioned, or some of these other movies that we have seen that we know are probably in picture, they're just not directing heavy movies, have that shot of getting into that 5th slot.
I could definitely see those happen. Justine Triet, you know, if Anatomy of a Fall becomes a major contender, as I was saying it might be a few weeks ago, then yeah, absolutely, she's in the top 5. But at this point, I'm a little bit more on the fence with Anatomy of a Fall than I have been in previous weeks. But let's move on to the Best Original Screenplay category, which you're going to be taking this week.
Well, we have a new entry into this category, and that new entry is immediately my number 1. That is Barbie. Barbie gets its screenplay win that we've been talking about for like the last 2-3 months. Like, oh, can it win Adapted? It has Oppenheimer. It has Poor Things. It has Killers of the Flower Moon. Well, now it has Anatomy of a Fall, The Holdovers, Past Lives, Air. I think Barbie's above all of those. So number 1, Barbie. Anatomy of a Fall was my previous number 1. I had that overtaking Past Lives. Past Lives is my 3. Currently, I thought about this in my Best Picture episode. Past Lives is my number 11 in picture, but this is the only nomination I have it receiving at this moment. If it cracks its way back into the top 10, then yeah, we could see other stuff coming along, like editing, like score, like actress, like supporting actor. But at the moment, I could see this being one of our lone screenplay nominees. Holdovers, number 4. I don't see the angle for this win like I've seen some other people out there say after it's already been screened, but a nomination, very secure. And then number 5, here's where I feel like people can have fun with. I think there's a handful of movies that you could put at your 5th slot. Do you go another solo nominee of Air? Do you go something that has some above the line play like May December? Do you go with a Best Picture player like Maestro? If you're very strong with Coleman Domingo, you could go Rustin. If you believe Napoleon is a real player, why not that? And if you want to swing for the fences, Boy and the Heron, or one I think is a little bit more, cool and could help build a package for Best Actress, would be Priscilla. If they really love that movie, if Spaney is in win contention, maybe Screenplay could tag along for that 5th slot.
I think you're underrating The Holdovers. It should be number 2. Why is it that in picture you have The Holdovers at number 5, above Past Lives and above Anatomy of a Fall, but here you have it below both of those films.
And picture Holdovers is safe for nomination. In this category, Anatomy and Past Lives would win over Holdovers would. So Holdovers, I think,
Really?
is stronger
No.
for nomination than both of them. But I think Anatomy, I think Past Lives have a better winning angle.
I so disagree. I think the Holdovers would absolutely win over either Anatomy or Past Lives at this point. The Holdovers is a really strong script, and the film really coasts by on the strength of that screenplay. It's charming, and it holds the delicate balance between the melancholy, the sadness of this movie, and the humor, the lightness, the charm and joy. This isn't your average crowd pleaser. I'd say you gotta put it at number 2. It has a better winning angle than Anatomy of a Fall. Definitely a better one than Past Lives at this point. It's a more conventional screenplay, and it's funny. They like funny stuff. I find it interesting that so many people at this point have Maestro in picture, but out of screenplay. I want to know from you, what is it about Maestro's script that has you putting it at number 7, below Air and below May December, which both seem to be weaker contenders overall than Maestro?
I think Air is one of those type of movies that is the script. There is a very strong campaign for the screenplay with how Affleck and Damon gave up their credits, gave it to the guy, let them let this be his shining moment while they kind of rewrote it all. Plus, I think if Air could pop up anywhere, it is here. We always get solo screenplay nomination. I know I have Past Lives in at the moment, but if Past Lives cracked its way in the picture, that slot is open again. As long as the movie is still well received once we hit award season, it's one of those just check boxes. You could see Past Lives miss somewhere. You could see Anatomy miss somewhere. But Air is consistent across the board. May December for me is one of those movies where if it's going to be a player, screenplay needs to come along. Maestro, I can see it live in Best Picture, live in the acting categories, miss here. Look at Elvis last year. One of those movies that the script isn't where you come to find the highlights of the movie. You're looking more towards the performances, the technical categories. Maestro is one of those movies where I've been saying all along, like, oh, why don't people have this in the top 5? But now that Barbie is here, Maestro went out. Before Barbie was in, I did have Maestro at my number 4 slot. But with Barbie coming into the category, I have Maestro dropping down below because I have Air and May December being possible, solo screenplay nominees battling for that 5th slot.
Something I've realized, I just looked at my both screenplay lineups, and literally my entire top 10 are all of the screenplay nominees. Like my top 10 in picture, I have 5 of those are my original nominees, and 5 of them are my adapted nominees, which is crazy. That's like wild to me that's how it's playing out. But it looks like it's playing out that way. I do think Maestro is stronger in this category than Air, and definitely than May December. Now, some that you don't have mentioned here that I think are worth mentioning, Saltburn. It's not a big contender. It really isn't. But something that I have heard repeatedly shouted out was the screenplay and how witty it is. So it might be worth just considering for a top 10 slot. Same with Asteroid City. I know this film is not, in your mind, going to be on the table for a nomination, but it's stronger than something like Rustin. Rustin is one of the most formulaic, boring scripts that I could ever possibly imagine. And the thing about Asteroid City is Wes Anderson has been liked by the writer's branch in the past. Even when his films haven't gotten picture nominations or haven't been contenders in other categories, they have made screenplay. For example, Moonrise Kingdom or The Royal Tenenbaums were both screenplay nominees before he hit it big with The Grand Budapest Hotel. And lastly, I just want to mention Fair Play as a potential.
The reason why I have Rustin here is if Domingo is win contender, something needs to come along. This could be that something. And then for Asteroid City, I feel like we talk about this every time I do original screenplay. I don't see it getting the nomination. It's definitely top 10. I see zero chance for it to get the nomination, so it's not in my 10. But once we hit the time, once we get like 2-3 months later, it will be in my 10 once I know, like, hey, Napoleon's not a player at all. Domingo's not in win contention. Priscilla, maybe not as strong as it might seem in actress. Then yeah, it'll fill that 10, that 9, that 8 slot. I just don't see a world where it would get in over something like Maestro, something like Air, something like Past Lives. I feel like all 3 of those would be ahead of where it's at.
Now, I will say Domingo is currently my choice to win Best Actor, and I don't have Rustin anywhere near screenplay. I don't think that this is a performance that needs stuff to back it up. It's a performance that stands on its own. As much as I'm not a huge fan of the performance, other people really are, and those people aren't talking about the script or the movie.
Well, that carries us over to the other screenplay category and adapted. As you've mentioned, your 5 here are all Best Picture nominees. I have the same 5 at the moment, but I don't have one of these in picture. Wonder which one it is.
Ooh, I know what it is. So, at number 1, I have Poor Things. It's winning. Like I said earlier, If we have a split between director and screenplay, then we're gonna see Poor Things take screenplay and Oppenheimer take director. I think Poor Things wins both. It is unique, it's original, it's fresh, it's new, it's exciting. Those are things that people look for in this category. We are not awarding films like Oppenheimer, like Flower Moon in the screenplay category anymore. Those are movies of the past. Those epics, they don't happen anymore in these categories. What we want now in the screenplay categories, what people look for in a winner in those categories is something fresh. Like how Barbie is an original screenplay, Poor Things is an adapted screenplay. Following that up, there's Oppenheimer. Now, Oppenheimer is one of the strongest contenders, and the thing that puts it above the fact that it is a historical drama is that it's very dialogue heavy. And if this ends up winning Best Adapted Screenplay, it is because of the dialogue. Unlike last year with All Quiet on the Western Front, for example, which was a stronger Best Picture contender than Women Talking, that movie was not reliant on the dialogue, and it was just this sort of historical epic. That might have won in the past, but not now. Whereas Women Talking, a more dialogue-heavy movie, is a more modern screenplay winner. Oppenheimer does have both, so I could see a winning angle for Oppenheimer in the screenplay category. I wouldn't have too much of a problem with that, if I'm being honest. The dialogue is very strong, and the structure is very interesting. At number 3, I have American Fiction. This is going to be controversial. Some people are going to say, above Killers of the Flower Moon, are you crazy? Yeah, I'm crazy. Have you watched any of our videos? I'm fucking nuts. It's the People's Choice winner. It is an incredibly strong contender in the picture category, and it's only strong in that category because of the script. This script is very smart. It is very funny. It is a film that had my entire press screening dying of laughter, which I don't see in press screenings. Press screenings, you don't see the audience move at all. It gets that reaction. It makes people feel smart, is what I'm gonna say. It is not a difficult or challenging movie, but it makes people feel as though they're being challenged, which is a big asset. It's a middle brow movie that can be watched by anyone and appreciated, that poses itself as an intellectual film. It reminds me a lot of 90s Woody Allen. Movies that people who love Ingmar Bergman movies and read nonfiction books can watch and go, that was so intelligent. I love what it had to say about all of these things, all these topics. But, like, it's not really that deep or smart. It just makes people feel like it is, because it's about academia, it's about books, it's about publishing. It makes people feel good. I don't see an avenue for this to win. Now, Killers of the Flower Moon is safe for a nomination, but, like I just said, this is a film of the past. This is the type of movie that may have won this category in the 90s, but wouldn't nowadays. I hear what your argument is for this movie, Dylan, that the way that they shifted the perspective of the book from the FBI to the Osage tribe, yes, that is very valiant, that is very important, but it's also a white savior narrative. And I don't think that people are going to be jumping to give an award to Scorsese and Eric Roth for writing a story from the perspective of the Osage, no matter how respectful they were of the Osage people. It's a crime thriller movie that prioritizes action, and it doesn't seem like the type of movie that wins an Oscar anymore. And finally, number 5, All of Us Strangers. This one is a little subtle, but if you look at what I have underneath it, what else is going to get this nomination?
I feel like there's a outside possibility. I mean, I have All of Us Strangers as my number 5 slot for the first off, but if, let's say, Hitman does come out this year, it catches on, Netflix pushes it, that is a possibility. Dumb Money, we've had dumber stuff get in, and if Origin becomes, like, you know, the people who love Origin really boosted up Origin's here as well. And then, I mean, I know you're gonna say no, not at all, but if Zone of Interest is stronger than we think it is, this is a spot it could pop up in.
No, giving Zone of Interest a screenplay prize would be like giving the Mona Lisa a Pulitzer Prize for literature. There's no script in this movie. You're watching chores for most of the movie. And yes, thematically, it's very interesting, but everything about it is the direction, not the screenplay. The writing here is just scenarios with very little dialogue, and no plot. There's maybe one scene in this movie that I think was really well written, but otherwise it's just not that kind of movie.
But yes, like I said, All of Us Strangers is my number 5 slot at the moment. That is another solo screenplay nomination movie I do have on my list. But what are your next in line? Because I see one of these here that at least probably, hurts your heart a little bit that you had to take out of your top 5.
Yeah, I got Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse outside the top 5. I could see this making its way back in, but like I said before, in a year where more movies failed, this movie would have a good chance. But this year, we have the anomaly of all of the movies that we expected to be good were good, and some of the ones that we didn't expect to be good were also good. And now Spider-Man is just kind of sitting on the outside saying, hey, remember me? And that's the question. Will people remember it? Or will they prioritize the other films that are newer? Will it end up at the Oscars? No, I don't think it will. And, that's just how it goes. I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong. When the signs point to being wrong, I will always ride for an animated film until I see that there's no way that it happens. And in this case, there's no way that it happens, unfortunately. Then, number 7, got The Color Purple. Look, if it's a picture contender, maybe it makes it in. It is a musical. We've seen those types of films have troubles in the past. Then Hitman, Dumb Money, Origin, and finally Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, and Blackberry round out my list. Those last two I think might get some critics awards and nothing else, which is why they're kind of down there. And you know what? Screw it. I'll throw Zone of Interest down there. But that rounds out my adapted screenplay list. I feel very, very good about the top 5 here, is what I'm going to say. I think they are all very, very strong. And then after that, it's just very weak, which is actually interesting. Because remember a few weeks ago, even a month back, we were like, wow, adapted is so crowded, and original screenplay is barren. And now I think the categories are pretty much even, except I think that there's more competition for the top 5 in original screenplay than there is in adapted screenplay.
I mean, the biggest difference of that is Barbie has now flipped, so then we went from having 6, 7, 8 movies in adapted to now really only 5, maybe 6 movies, and now original we're like, oh, it's just Past Lives and what else? And now it's Past Lives and Barbie and Anatomy and Holdovers. Plus, then you have Air, Maestro, May December, other stuff. So yeah, I fully get that. But everyone out there, let us know, what are you predicting the screenplay categories? Do you have Barbie and Poor Things? Do you have an Oppenheimer sweep, including director? Let us know down below. But until next time, my name is Dyl.
And my name is Matt, and this is Fantasy Filmball.